Why is there not a cybersecurity free tier? In almost every industry, there is an affordable entry point, but in cyber, all of us, customers and companies, we're forced to invest thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get started. And even then, breaches are continuing to happen. All that and more. Run the intro.
Who says tech can't be human?
What's going on, Hacker Valley fam? Welcome back to the show. I have the honor of having a very special guest that not only has been a guest on the show before, but they're also the presenting sponsor for this live stream and podcast episode, Beauceron Security. And with me, I have the CEO and field CISO of Beauceron Security, David Shipley. David, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you back. It would be great to start for anyone that missed the last session. If you could just give us a quick overview on what you're doing at Beauceron Security. I think it's very rare that you hear CEO and field CISO. So give us a little bit of background on Beauceron and also the combination of your two titles.
Absolutely. So we're focused on the human side of cyber. And for those who aren't familiar, cyber means people, technology, and control. And we focus so much in this industry on the technology side or using technology to control people. And the outcomes continuously are getting worse. And so people is where we need to see more emphasis. It's where the greatest returns are, the greatest value can be created for organizations. Even though it's not the most expensive item you can spend money on, it's the fastest to reduce risk, and I think has longer term implications. And the definition of crazy is doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yep.
And I think we have to make a paradigm shift. And some of the data points that are even dropping this week from the Verizon data breach report, from the FBI's IC3 report, are all pointing towards we're not trending in the right direction. The world is getting more dangerous. It's going to be impossible to keep up with what we're doing the way we're doing it. And so Beauceron is a software as a service provider that's really focused on security awareness, behavior, and culture. And we were the first to introduce concepts around gamification, a personal cyber risk score, and weaving powerfully concepts from behavioral science, psychology, biology into engaging people, not just to make them aware that cyber is a thing, but to actually motivate them to care. And through that motivation, actually drive risk reduction and engagement.
A lot of people try to treat cybersecurity like medicine. We spoke about this off the record, but we talked about companies treat cybersecurity like medicine because we're like the medical client where we wait until something very bad happens and then we invest in abundance of resources in it, whether it be medicine or money, therapy. And it's the same thing for cybersecurity. We wait until ultimately something bad happens or until we learn that something bad happened to someone else. And then I would say almost start overreacting, but maybe that's a good thing because that's kind of what our bodies do as well when, we're attacked by viruses and bacteria.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think part of the DNA that shapes a lot of people in our industry is that ideal that we want to be the cyber first responders. There's the adrenaline rush. We want to stop the bad guys, the bad gals, the attacker elements. We want to be, I think, heroes in that particular story and seen as the sentinels defending our organizations. But the challenge is that, if we use that healthcare analogy, by the time someone has a serious critical illness, a cancer, and now you're doing the x-rays and you're doing the diagnosis and you're trying to come up with a treatment plan, prognoses get worse and worse. The cost of the intervention expands dramatically. Mm-hmm. And the toll on both the patient and the healthcare individuals delivering that increases dramatically in terms of the psychological impact. Going through an incident is incredibly traumatic. And so we have abandoned prevention, and part of it was this notion in the last decade that okay, all of our defensive cybersecurity technologies couldn't keep the attackers out. So it's not a matter of if, it's when you get breached became the dogma within our industry. And then we started hyper focusing on we're just going to catch them once they're in. We're just going to catch the cancer once it's visible on the scanners. Problem is, then you've got cancer. You've got an issue you've got to deal with. And what we're seeing from various reports is this strategy is failing us. So one of the interesting findings from the Verizon data breach incident report is now 44%, almost half of all incidents, involve ransomware. A company called Rubrik just dropped a really fascinating enterprise study that involves 1,600 people from Europe, the United States, and it says 86% of enterprises are still paying ransoms because their advanced backup and recovery fails in part or in whole. So, to take our analogy further, waiting for someone to get cancer, waiting for it to metastasize, and then things are just so much worse from there. But why do we do that? And why do we struggle overall as a society to take this healthcare analogy? Is that nutrition, healthy eating, living, balancing stress, all the preventative stuff it seems so achingly simple, but it's also ridiculously hard. And we'd rather go to the shiny thing.
Mm-hmm.
Have to change that mindset.
I relate on both sides to this of where I really believe that, if we were putting more nutrition into the system, whether it be training or time with the vendors that we work with because we buy their solutions. I don't think that we spend enough time with our vendors and, learn more about the nuances of their software. But I also relate on the other side as well, because I just got this tweak in my back recently. And what I've been thinking about is, oh, I need to get a massage. Oh, I should go to the chiropractor. Or you can start, getting back into the gym, doing more stretches. I think that's more of the nutrition in this situation for me. But what would you say is the number one piece of nutrition for cyber, right? Like, how could we be more proactive rather than reactive from your perspective?
I think this is the key part that managed service providers need to be thinking about as they are in a hyper competitive environment, trying to serve all of these clients. You're not going to differentiate to your clients based on tools. You are going to differentiate based on being the ones to want to understand their business context, their challenges, and then coming up with a bit of that health plan, things that they could be doing to better understand their security. The low hanging fruit, obviously, security awareness and training and making sure they're doing it right. And when you're doing security awareness and training at the next level, which is what Gartner and we've adopted the same terminology, security awareness, behavior, and culture, you're measuring employee attitudes and perceptions. And you're really talking about what interventions in the form of marketing collateral, which is what security awareness and behavior actually is. It's not training, it's marketing. You're selling a lifestyle. You're
Mm-hmm.
not just disseminating information. You're figuring out what are the key messages people need to understand. And in a past episode, we covered the fact that people that think that the tech tools that the organization provides them completely protects them from internet threats. And when they believe that, that's 1 out of 3 employees now. When they believe that, they have 140% higher click rate. So as an MSP, helping do some of that sentiment analysis to your end customer, say, okay, here's where people are actually at. Do they know that cyber is a thing? Yep, great. But do they think that they're completely protected by the tools? Oh, wow. Yeah, we've got a high percentage of that. So our key messaging this year needs to be this. And you're really helping drive that, okay, this is the role the individual plays. But it's bigger than that. It's also about understanding how people work. And so when you take the time to say, okay, what is it that you need to do to accomplish your organizational goals? And do you have the right tools? One of the things I see in the financial services industry a lot is when you look at all their data loss prevention incidents, 95% of the time, people weren't trying to do something bad. They were just trying to do their job. They were trying to make the customer happy. And so, you as a service provider, can you help them say, listen, you need a better secure file and signature tool that's going to solve this regulatory compliance and this privacy and security risk. And then Do people know how to use the tool? But what we want to do is we just want to sell the defensive alerting technologies because we don't want to spend the time getting to know the patient. We don't want to really think about an actual plan. But I think it's interesting. In the last few weeks, I've had some conversations with some really sharp cybersecurity firms that are starting to turn the corner on this. That we have to take this analogy of we need to get people out of the emergency room model of cyber and into the healthcare team with the nutritionist, with the doctor, with the specialist to actually help the person live a successful and healthy lifestyle. In our case, we want people to run thriving businesses that take advantage of digital technology, everything from the latest artificial intelligence and whatnot, while being secure. And when you do that, you're creating value. You're not a transactional relationship to the business. You're actually a valued partner. And I think that's going to be the key differentiator for a lot of MSPs.
I have to jump in for a second to share some details about our sponsor for this episode, Beauceron Security. We hear about cyber in the news every single day, whether it's a massive data breach, a disruptive ransomware attack, or AI-generated bots wreaking havoc online again. It's safe to say we've never been more aware of cybersecurity risks. Yet losses from cybercrime are continuing to rise. And awareness, it's not enough. We need to motivate behavior change. Adding a high-quality security, behavior, and culture program to your managed service offering is the thing that's going to deliver actionable results for your clients and help you differentiate your offering in this very competitive landscape. Beauceron Security is the best trusted partner for managed service providers to deliver a comprehensive awareness and resilient solution that drives effective risk reduction. With a science-based, automated approach, MSPs who leverage the Beauceron solution can automate over 75% of actions related to email triage and analysis, resulting in a significant savings of billable hours. Enhance your managed service offering with a solution that will grow your business and be part of a partnership that puts you first. Visit their website at beauceronsecurity.com/partner. Thank you, Beauceron Security, for sponsoring this episode. I'm glad that we're talking about MSPs because in some situations, in some scenarios, it kind of feels like the MSPs, they just want all of our money. They want all of our money. They want all of our IT and security business. They want us to go only through them when it comes to buying tech. And, there's a little bit of a markup, rightfully so, because it's a transaction fee. Someone has to enter in information to the system and nurture it, make sure that it goes through and you ultimately get your product or solution. But that's how their business succeeds, by constantly onboarding new technology, new systems, new ideas, new people to our security program. But it sounds like what you're saying is that's not necessarily the route. That can work for some time, but you're bound to run into some issues if you just continually buy without fully understanding the organization and the culture.
Well, I mean, let's put it in blunt terms. If all you're concerned about is your billing hours to your end client, and so you're not doing preventative healthcare, that you make more money when bad things happen. Well, how many of your customers go out of business because of these things, or churn to somebody else because they're not seeing the value of this? That if you're just seen as transactional, then you are replaceable. You're not adding to the value. You're the worst thing, I think, from an MSP perspective is to be seen as a cost center. That's just a cost center that needs to be managed, rather than a partner that's actually helping us grow our business in smart, safe ways. You get good doctors, you get bad doctors, right? And it's not to say that the medical analogy here is by any or field is perfect. I mean, we've got all kinds of interesting analogies to this, right? The oversized impact of certain pharmaceutical companies on what gets prescribed. And I'm, not going to make an OxyContin complete analogy over to this, but, there may be a point about, are we suffering from an overprescription of certain things? So the nature of incentives has been to do that thing. So the parallels are not outlandish on that side. So do we want to help them actually thrive? And I think for a lot of MSPs, it's really important. Yeah, you got to make money. These are private sector businesses, and oftentimes the margin on larger cybersecurity solutions is what helps actually keep the lights on. And so you are biased to promote those things. I've seen this. I've seen this in cases where clients would really benefit from someone intervening by talking about security awareness, behavior, and culture, but the salesperson is either not comped on that awful idea, or that the average contract value, because our industry has devalued the oversized impact that we have, is too low compared to that. And so what I think has to happen is that there has to be almost a rebalancing of the ethical push and pull, a Hippocratic oath for MSPs. First of all, do no harm. That has to say, okay, what does this customer actually need?
Mhm.
And here's the really cool thing. There are two ways that awareness, behavior, and culture programs working the human side help the MSP. Number one, particularly if you're an MSP that's providing incident response and SOC services, lowering the amount of bad things that are happening by working the human element, which is absolutely proven. You cut down phishing incidents from 35% to less than 5% by running a good program. Means that the pressure on your team to respond and your cost of service drops. And so you're actually focusing on the real stuff that adds value in that side. And so you are actually improving your overall business efficacy by focusing on this. So don't get lost in the low ACV. Remember how this fits into the holistic provision of services.
So I want to dig into that because I could see that working, but it's very hard to quantify. It's hard to show over time. I'm not sure if we even have the solutions in place. I think that you're working on that and building that out, and you have a lot of data points. So let's go into some of those data points. How do you measure the cultural impact for security at an organization?
So this is a problem that we're diving very deep on, and we're excited because in June we're going to be launching a beta of a new series of security culture diagnostics that are really really interesting and easy for everyday people to understand. You don't have to be a deep cybersecurity awareness and culture nerd to understand what direction, where things are headed. I think what people need to understand is it's not about click rates. Right? Click rates are not a cultural indicator in and of themselves. It's not even just about report rates. It's about people's attitudes and perceptions. That's a leading indicator of culture. How much do they care about securing their organization? How much do they think their bosses care about that? Today, we've got surveys inside of our technology that help surface this data, but we're going to make it more clear and aligned as to what to do with that data, what toggles and buttons to turn on in the technology, and what conversations and what messages you need to have to build on that. So that sentiment part is going to be incredibly important. But part of it's also about, where are the opportunities that are being missed? Closing the feedback loop, right? We now know from our data conclusively, giving people a report a phish button where they can just click the button and it's easier than exploring the email itself to figure out if it's real or bad. It's faster and easier to do the right thing, dramatically cuts down your phishing click rates. Because I've made it that was easy button, not the is it good for the company button. So those are important things. And so looking at what people are reporting, what they're struggling with, and looking at those things. But what's interesting is we've got some fresh data, and this segues well into it. And one of the questions that we've been dying to answer is, why did you click? And so for the first time ever, we've got 2,600 responses from across our customer base from a random sample about why people clicked. And one of the most interesting things is that for the people that know why they clicked, about 1 in 5 people don't remember clicking, which is fascinating, right? And so they are working so fast they don't even remember doing the
Mm.
bad thing, which really creates some interesting notions about this post-click report rate. This idea of why didn't you tell me you clicked? Well, if you didn't even know you clicked, that's interesting. So there's more to explore in that. But what was interesting is 64% of the why I clicked came down to I was expecting something similar or it looked legitimate. And the I was expecting something similar often comes down to you're using your personal email or your work email for personal things that you shouldn't be. And so if you're an MSP paying attention to this and you ask your client and say, hey, listen, we've got this data. Here's why people are clicking. Here's a policy recommendation. And here are tech tools that could potentially help flag or deal with people sending personal stuff to work when they shouldn't be. So here's how we can treat this particular medical cyber condition.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, we can reduce the pressure on that real click rate. Same as the it looked legitimate. What that screams to is we need to reinforce that message of if you think it looks legitimate, you're not sure, just click the report button, right? So driving up that side. But the last piece of data, and this one is the most interesting, is that 5% of people say, I clicked on it because I was scared that I would get in trouble if I didn't do that thing. And what's interesting about this group is that of all the groups I've mentioned, when we went back and look at that group's average click rate over time, they have a 13% average click rate on phishing emails, and they have the lowest report rate. And so when we talk about as a partner reaching back and saying, what is the culture like inside of the organization? Do we make sure that people don't feel like they have to quickly respond or they're going to be punished? And that is key messaging that should be delivered. Don't get lost in all the vendor canned content that's out there or the cool Netflix TV series. If the most important thing is a company town hall that says we're never going to get mad at you if you question an email you receive. Maybe it comes from the CEO and says you absolutely have to do this, and you go, this doesn't seem right. And it's always okay to ask somebody to question it, to slow down.
Mhm.
And that's how we're going to work around phishing. We're not going to solve phishing with email filters. We're not going to solve it with EDRs alone. We're not going to solve it with the latest browser plugin to play the cat and mouse game to detect the latest cool phishing landing. These are all important, but we're going to actually make more progress by creating cultures of psychological safety.
That's a good point. If you work in an environment where anything that comes from your stakeholders, your CEO is a direct order, then how are you not going to click on those phishing links? I don't see a world in which that would happen.
Yeah, my favorite all time business email compromise prevention story, and I don't know if I shared this before, but it was a higher education institution in North America. I won't highlight which one because it's pretty salty, but they knew it wasn't their university president because the scammer said thank you at the end of the email, and their president was not a nice person and never said thank you for anything. And so, interesting culture there, but it was a cultural cue. But how do we use that to our advantage?
Wow. Thank you. And a lot of people that I know have at some point in their career, whether it's been at their current employer or previous employer, they've all felt like they've been on the chopping block at some point, especially with all the layoffs that are going on. I would say since the pandemic, it's been like waves of layoffs, and especially tech companies and other verticals as well. So there's also a little bit of an unease that, jobs aren't as permanent as they are. Even, the employees are leaving after, 2 to 4 years on average in the security field. And then you have the fact that people are getting laid off. So I, how would you go about it? Like, if you were to work with your clients, how would you go about it from a software perspective to get them, using Beauceron, but also in a state to where they're going to be successful? And what would you tell them about psychological safety to start building that culture where people can, be a little bit more autonomous on their questions and curiosity?
Yeah, and I think I'll put my MSP persona hat on for a second. So all of a sudden, you're an MSP and you're offering security awareness services, and you see your clients' click rates start to skyrocket, and you don't really understand why that's happening. All of a sudden, they seem much more susceptible to that. This is an opportunity to start gathering data. And one of the interesting things that people should be looking at beyond looking at how the difficulty mix may have changed, which is it's a whole episode on its own. But actually, one of the most interesting things that we found, and we validated this with particular customers, is that people who are with the organization for less than 2 years have double the click rate of those that are with the organization longer. And the reason is once you're with an organization longer, and this is also why small businesses generally do better than large businesses, you know who's who. You know who to ask questions to. You know what normal looks like. And so what that tells me is that if you're an organization with high turnover, that's creating additional risk. And so you need to actually talk about, hey guys, your turnover rate's really high. Why? Well, okay, what does your human resources data tell you about employee satisfaction? What are some of the things that are going on? Because one of the things about the Verizon data breach report that I find fascinating in the latest version is they're like, why didn't security training, phishing training programs get the click rate down to zero? Because zero is impossible, man. Because unless you're cheating the system, there's so many different variety factors happening, the stress environment being one of them that are leading to this risk factor. And so creating and enhancing psychological safety may be the thing that actually helps you get that click rate below that critical threshold. Training's only going to get you so far. It's like take our nutrition example. Eating well and exercising can only take you so far. You're still going to have other things that come into play. Managing your stress level, right? I mean, I'm a startup CEO. If I could run out all the stress that I have, I would be on the treadmill every single day for 4 hours. It has a diminishing return, right? So that still comes into play. But so putting that MSP hat, it's the ability to start thinking more broadly about the kinds of questions you can ask and the kind of alerts to have. One interesting conversation I had with a journalist recently was a study found that cyber incidents surged during mergers and acquisitions. And the original thesis from some folks was it's because there's this big pause on technology investment and they're not able to do more tools. And obviously, I'm going with that hey man, the tools ain't the problem. But if all of a sudden your key employees are bailing because they're not sure that they have a job coming up and you're losing all that corporate knowledge, expertise, and history of things, that's stupid expensive and stupid risky. So, one of the things I would say to big tech CEOs, to leaders of large enterprises across the country who are jumping on the AI agent, I'm going to replace all these really expensive humans with hallucinating AI. Wait for it. But also, these people are your greatest asset. And so making sure that they feel valued is important. Another interesting data point, more research to follow, but for the first time ever, we were able to work with a partner and look at what role compensation levels play in click rates. And it turned out that their 3 lowest compensation levels were where the majority of their clicks were. And so that employee affinity and loyalty to the company has a direct tie to right. And so what I'm saying is an MSP that's only looking at your tech stack, that's only looking at the bits, that's not looking at the human side. I think we need to add, really, really progressive MSPs should have a change management practice, may even want to partner with the best HR firms to start having these conversations and offer this value, because that's how we're going to solve cyber, because it's hidden right there in the word: people, technology, and control.
When I was working in the incident response arena, one of the things that we would do is we would have a retrospective. We would go through all of the details. But it was oftentimes when we go through the details, it felt like these details were not attached to any specific one person. It was just the facts, rather than how it affected people, like more of the qualitative information. Hey, someone pulled an all-nighter last night, making sure that we're all good as a team. That's going to make me think about my responsibility for security a little bit differently. Knowing that someone wasn't able to close their tab out last night because our payment processing system went down. And because of that, they had to walk home. Boom. Like all of a sudden, my perspective is now completely different. So I think you're totally right. We're very removed from the human element of who does what, how it affects the organization. In many all hands for companies, we talk about the numbers and the state of the company from a financial perspective. But what about from a technological perspective and human perspective? Hey, on average, our team members aren't having to burn the midnight oil and give up time with their family. We did some research, and we have 80% health for psychological safety. I think also bubbling up that information is going to give people that responsibility to react in all types of ways, but especially from a security perspective.
Absolutely. And in finding ways as a, when we think about managed security service providers, security is a perception,
Hmm.
right? It's not, it's like, it's do I feel secure? And so how you communicate that matters. So let's take an example. You're a leading edge MSP and you're helping your clients triage the reported emails that are coming in. And at the end of the year, you prepare a presentation that either can be delivered electronically or virtually in a town hall or by an executive leader or by you alongside your company leader. Say, here's all the attacks your employees stopped this year. Here's some that they clicked on, but they went and they told us about, so we were able to shut it down before it became a thing. So you can celebrate your absolute rock stars, people that just saw it, spotted it, and help protect the organization. Awesome. Then we can also have your player of the game, for lack of analogy, and I'm Canadian, so I'm kind of a hockey or sports kind of analogy at some point, and say, hey, yeah, this person, they made a mistake, but they did the next most important thing. They told us about it, and so it didn't become a big deal. And so again, you're creating conditions of status and recognition, building on that neuroscience model we've talked about in the past, SCARF,
Hmm.
from David Rock. You're also creating opportunities to highlight you can still do right even when you make a mistake. So again, psychological safety on that side, but then you're also reinforcing in a really public way how your team helped, right? So because David reported this, we were able to pull all these phishing attacks out of inboxes that were still there. That's what we were able to do to help you, our small mid-sized business customer or enterprise customer. Oh, because Sam clicked on it, but then said, "Oh, geez, I should tell somebody about it." We were able to see the malware. We were able to see that the EDR, the endpoint detect response, the MDR kicked in and shut it down. We didn't see any other suspicious activity, and we were able to close out that incident really quickly. And we had some important context from Sam about what was going on, and that helped fill the picture out. That's how you build relationships. People remember stories.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm literally talking to a master storyteller, but that's what they remember. They're not going to remember click rates. They're going to remember the story of David or Sam or
Hmm.
right. And so tell those stories. But here's the thing, Beauceron originally thought clients could do that. Most MSP clients don't have the resources to run a security awareness program. They surely do not have the expertise and resources to run an awareness, behavior, and culture program as outlined by Gartner. But those skills to do those things are eminently scalable from an MSP perspective. And so the opportunity to tell those customer success stories is in that MSP's hands. And that's where you build decades long relationships with customers.
I want to do something for a second. If you could speak directly to all of the MSPs that are out there right now, what are you going to tell them?
Your customers need you more than ever before, but they need you not just to be taking their money and installing equipment. They need an advisor. They need someone to help answer their questions, to help be their partner in building their success story from a technology standpoint. And doing that will give you much greater gains as a business than the vendor of the month, the technology AI tool of the year, all of these things. These will come and go. Relationships last. And the best sellers know that. And so when you become a trusted advisor, you overcome oh, this person's just here to sell me. And
Right.
security, awareness, behavior, and culture is the opportunity to build trust if you do it well.
If you do it well, that's the hard part. If you do it well, you know, I love everything that you're saying because I think we're entering in a world where security teams are being more transparent. When I worked at Intel many years ago, it's close to 10 years ago now at this point, we were advised not to tell anybody all the details. Always leave out the most sensitive information because you never know who they're going to tell about the details that we share. But now it seems like we're kind of opening up. Even organizations are more transparent when sharing with their sister organizations in the same vertical or similar industries, with ISAC groups and whatnot. I think we're now getting into a state where we know that the more that we're transparent with the people that we trust, the more that we're going to get the help.
Yeah, and there's a fantastic book by Matthew Syed called Black Box Thinking. And it's this idea of blameless problem analysis and learning. And, he explores everything from what happens in the medical field when people cover up surgical errors and they don't learn from those mistakes and the really life and death consequences of that, to aviation, which, has learned over decades the painfulness of not learning from mistakes and has adopted that it's not about pointing the finger, it's about learning, fixing, improving, repeating. And, it requires a culture shift. We still have this issue in cybersecurity where we blame the victim.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to this behavior that you just described. Oh God, we couldn't talk about that we made a mistake because it's going to be our fault. Blaming the victim is wrong. There's an opportunity to better understand why things happened. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. If we can't admit, and by the way, 17% of folks in our study were, I was rushing. That's why I clicked. If we can't be honest about and tell people, listen, that's why it happened. They were rushing. Oh, what's the solution for that? Not be busy? No, we're human beings. We're organizations. We got stuff to do.
Yeah.
But it's about making sure that we've organized ourselves to be productively successful. That we're not so rushed that we're going to create the circumstances that are going to cause us a problem. But you can't have that conversation if someone doesn't feel safe to actually admit that. And again, if selling tools to your customers, if silver bullet thinking was going to work, you would think after 30 years of doing this in cyber, we wouldn't have the worst year ever in 2024. So we got to change the approach.
This is, I feel like this is healing in a way, because once you start doing these things, even if you start from a security awareness perspective, investing more into your people and more into your culture, you're going to see many positive side effects in other areas. This reminds me of when I started meditating. I started meditating and then I actually got more strong at the gym. Like I was able to lift more because I was focused on my breathing, and then I was starting to sleep better. And then, that trickles down to other people because now you're more positive. You're that CEO that puts thank you at the bottom of the email now. And people think that that's actually you. I think that this is like one of those things that you do that's just a net positive. It's going to help your security, but it's going to help your team.
If people don't believe that what they do matters in terms of behaving securely, and if they don't see how this is helping them do their job better, then other pressures are going to rise and security will naturally fall down the list. So again, if that executive assistant feels like he's going to get fired because he didn't reply fast enough to that email, you can pound away at security awareness training modules and it is not going to make a whit of difference.
Mm-hmm.
But if you create the environment where it's like, it's okay to slow down, it's okay to say, listen, we were slammed today. I wasn't able to get everything scheduled safely, right? Like all of a sudden, and this is where, cyber often thinks it's inventing new things. I often make this joke about Silicon Valley. It's like, it's all of a sudden these streaming companies are bundling together and they're creating this. I'm like, oh, you've created cable television. Great. Phenomenal full circle innovation.
Right.
But in our sense, what industry had to learn about physical safety in avoiding workplace injuries and deaths, which came about because of changes in legislation and regulatory environment and other things. But then they realized, to your point earlier, doing this thing actually helped them make a better business. Companies that have assertiveness training and allow for critical thinking and allow people to question things are going to thrive in the age of generative AI technologies. Companies that are command and control, fear-driven, psychologically unsafe are going to be prime prey for cyber criminals, and they are going to fail to yield the advantages of this next technological leap.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm saying about security awareness. And again, bringing that whole thing around to, thinking about this nutritionally. If we create security awareness marketing campaigns that only take the amount of time we need to teach people the core skills, but also have the key messages align with some of the perceptual gaps, issues, misconceptions, disinformation, whatever label you want to put to it. And along with that incentivizing to do the right thing, then we're going to optimize the results. And ultimately, one of the most effective things that companies should be doing in 2025, if you're embracing generative AI, do you have a critical thinking educational opportunity for people, like how to actually use critical thinking skills? Don't assume they have these. To
True.
give them actually the tools to do that. And guess what? They're going to appreciate not getting another password video because they've been hammered on the passwords. All of a sudden, it's like, hey, you want to use ChatGPT? Here's how you be successful using it.
Mic drop. Let's go. I love that. I love that. This whole time, David, you've been very kind to the audience by talking about this culture shift that I think could really help organizations, whether you're a security practitioner, especially an MSP. And you haven't talked at all about Beauceron, really, what you all do, except for that very part in the very beginning when I asked you about Beauceron. So I wanted to give you another chance to share with the audience, if they were to check out Beauceron, what could they expect? I would love for you to re-highlight that.
There are many different paths to do what I'm talking about today. What we're trying to do is make it as fast, easy, effective, and scalable to do these things and see the results as quickly as possible, as efficiently and effectively as possible. And what you'll see about Beauceron is that our passion is working the problem. We are driven by empirical data. We follow what the data is showing us, and then we create powerful defaults. We test, we experiment, and we innovate. You're not just buying a SaaS solution. With Beauceron, you're buying into the shared vision, not religion, but take that for what it's worth. The shared vision that people aren't the problem. People are the greatest asset inside your organization. That the key in 2025 to enabling them is not just throwing more and more and more information at already saturated human brains. It's optimizing the messages you have to deal with the perceptions they may have and the knowledge gaps they have in the most optimal fashion and make them feel good about the process and to align security with their success. So that's our whole jam. And we're bringing that expertise to the table, and we're constantly engaging and learning along that way. So if you're hungry to get beyond check the box, we're the company to check out because we're going to push the envelope and we're going to help companies actually achieve their missions securely. We don't want to be a transaction. We want to be that valued partner.
Love that. I 100% believe that you and the team are on to something great, not just from a security perspective and a security awareness perspective, but really bringing change to companies and helping security be that force multiplier rather than a cost center. David, I wanted to say thank you for jumping back on again. Also wanted to highly recommend everyone to check out Beauceron. We dropped a link into the comments. I actually have my onboarding session today, so I'm going to be able to also benefit from all of the great experiences that you've learned from and also capabilities that you and your team have built in. There will be much more that we're going to do together. So I'm excited to have you back on the show and also to do an update for the audience to share everything that we've learned and experienced by Hacker Valley using Beauceron.
Well, I'm so excited and excited to be part of the Hacker Valley story, right?
Yeah.
What a phenomenal resource you're providing to so many different organizations trying to tell their security story. And, I think playing our small role in helping keep your business secure and grow so that you can further help others. Like that's the greatest gift that you can do in business, is help others be successful. And I think that's the other part to MSPs is, if you can do a lot of things in your life. What you do as MSSPs is phenomenally important. We can help you get to the next level with your customers and see them be even more successful.
Let's do it together. David, thank you again. Thank you for everyone for joining. Be sure to check out Beauceron. And with that, we will see everyone next time.